This conference will now be recorded.
All right, great. So thank you so much for joining us for the HMIS, which I spelled wrong on the screen, reporting training. um, I assume that everyone who is in this training has the basic HMIS data entry training and understands how data gets into the system. Today's training is really more about how we get data out and what that means for actually using that in the decisions that we make. So a couple of things that we're going to go over. We're going to go over dashboard counts, canned reports, art, and report writer. These are all valuable tools that we have available to us in HMIS to help with reporting and getting information out of the system. So just briefly, I'm going to give you some general information on each of the types of reporting. I will then stop the presentation to show you a demo, and then we will continue on. So it'll be a back and forth between the presentation and the actual system to show you what that looks like. So we're going to start with dashboard reports. These are preset reports that actually sit on your home page. And then we're going to talk about canned reports, which are the ones that our vendor actually provides for us. Art reports that only apply to a couple of people if you have an art license, and then report writer where you can actually build your own report. So for dashboard reports, these are reports that are able to do just what they're called. They give you a count of the number of clients that meet a specific criteria, along with a really easy way to navigate to their list and their client record. So users can usually keep track of a certain number of clients within a project or that meet a certain criteria that you're looking for, and these will always be available to you when you first sign on. So as you can see here, they are a little box right on your home page. You are able to click the one that you want. That's why they are in blue. So by clicking the 12, you would then get the entire list of those people. And then you can also see that their client IDs are in blue, and you would be able to very quickly go to their client records. And then there is an option to download the list that actually allows you to manipulate those numbers. So dashboard reports have a ton of different options that you can choose from. Out of the many options, probably the three most used ones are clients that with no entry, with an entry but no exit. And so those are clients who are currently enrolled in whatever project that you set. And we'll go through how to make these. But the next one is my clients with no entry or exit. If you have set yourself as the case manager for the clients in a project that you are working with, you can actually just pull the ones that your name is tied to that are currently still enrolled. And then finally, clients with recent exits. So if you set a time period that you're looking for people who have exited that program, you are able to very quickly pull a list. So this is really helpful when you're double checking information or data as people have recently exited, especially for supervision. Pause this for a second and move over to service points so you can see what these look like. All right, so this is my home screen. It may look a little bit different than yours, but these are the counts reports. So sitting right on my dashboard, I have quick entry to all the projects that I have decided to have. Like I said, these are all clickable. You're able to click them and then be able to see all of the clients that actually are currently enrolled in the program. You're able to download that report as an Excel spreadsheet. Now to actually create the reports, you can click the pencil next to the counts report, and you have 4 reports that you can set up. So I think one of the downfalls to the way this is set up is you actually have to remember which project you put in each box. They do not label them that way for you, but this is going to show up in the top left. This one's the top right, bottom left, bottom right. But the way that they work is whatever report you want to use, know that you may not have all these options. I'm at a system administrator level, so I have a few more options than you would. I think for most of you, you're going to start this end user reports. So if you want to see those who are currently available in your project, then you just want to make sure that you select all dates, because we do not care what their entry date is. We want to see people who are still enrolled, and then you would select your project. Depending on what projects you have access to will determine how many projects you can select from. So I have access to the entire system. That's why I have so many projects to choose from. But you would select it, and then it would actually give you that count. At any point, if you end up changing these, so let's say that we go with my clients, you'll be prompted on the top to let you know that you have modified your homepage dashboard, and that if you want those changes to stay, then you do have to save it. If not, then you can undo the changes and it'll revert back to the last time it's saved. But really quick and easy way to get daily reports. I think top ways that these are used, our shelter providers will use them in order to get a quick list of all the people that are still enrolled in a shelter. Our rapid rehousing providers will actually use them. I think the My Clients one is really helpful to them because they do end up putting that they are their rapid rehousing client. And so they don't have to look at everyone who's enrolled in rapid rehousing, but just the ones who are assigned to them. So it's been really helpful for the providers to be able to have that really quick and easy way to flip through. You can change these as many times as you would like. Just remember each time to actually save the reports, or they will not be there for you the next time. You just have to change them again. All right, let me go back to the presentation. And so the next reports that are really helpful is what we call canned reports. These are provider reports, are considered the canned reports, and we'll show you how to get to those. But these are reports that our software vendor creates and maintains, and all users have the ability to run these reports. Now, I think the thing that's really important about these is there may be something that you hate about the way it runs or the way it looks. The COC doesn't have any options to change how these reports function. They're all maintained by our vendor. For a majority of them, they are required for federal funders or other reasons, but how they are is how they are. So if there's some kind of issue with the way that it's working, you can let me know. We can send it up to our vendor. But overall, you can't really manipulate the way these work, as you will be able to in some of the later reports that we're going to be talking about. And so for us, I think there's some major ones that we use pretty often. The APR being one of them. The APR is a federally mandated report that we use for COC funded projects, and they submit those to HUD each year. However, they can be really useful for any project, COC funded or not. And every user in the system has access to an APR. It gives a really quick and easy way to get basic aggregate numbers, deduplicated counts, and some basic information about performance measures that we are continuously monitoring. ESG CAPER is very similar to the APR, almost to the point where it asks many of the same questions. And so it is also a federally mandated report, which we use for those who have ESG funding. We do not receive ESG funding directly, but many of our providers do have ESG funding through their federal rapid rehousing dollars. So if you receive federal rapid, this is something that you do have to report every year through SAGE. but it can also be really helpful, again, to get some of those basic aggregates and performance measures, even for those who are not required to submit the report. There is a PATH project report, and that is a federally mandated report that is used for PATH funded projects and can be really helpful in monitoring how your progress towards those measures are going before you actually have to submit that federally mandated report. And then finally, we use service transactions. And this actually shows you all the service transactions that you have within a given time period. And so if you are putting in service transactions for either your shelter or your rapid rehousing prevention projects, then you're actually able to pull them really quickly this way to get that information. I think the only project that we had using shelter stays at one point through transactions was cold weather shelter. So it's not really an option for most people right now, but if we go back to that process, then you could actually pull shelter stays for cold weather shelter through this report as well. All right, so let's switch over to Service Point again, and I'll show you how to actually use those reports. So there's two ways to get to these reports. One way is to click the arrow next to reports and your drop down will come. Again, I may have some more options than what you do because of my level license, but a majority of the reports that we have been talking about is this first section right here. The other option is if you do end up clicking the reports, you'll see the provider report options and you can then go to each report from there. So let's go ahead and run an APR so I can show you what those look like. In the last few months, they did change the way the APR runs. So where before you would have to sit here and have it run to completion, they have now made it where you can get the report running and then come back to have it ready as you do other things. So you would put in the name of your report for whatever you want to put it in for. So let's say we're going to look at last year's numbers. If you're on the provider setting, you would search by the individual provider that you would like to include. The other option is reporting group, and I don't think this is used enough. Rather than doing each project individually to get the individual outcomes for each project, you can actually use a reporting group that covers multiple projects. So especially for Micah, Jill, since you're on here, you could actually pull what's our overall rapid numbers rather than each of your rapid projects individually, or what's your overall PSH numbers rather than your PSH projects individually, if that's something that you're looking for. You will have access to certain reporting groups, depending on what you've been given access to. We can always create you reporting groups. Just let me know if you need something changed. But if you go to search, if you type FRCOC, which is what all of ours start with, you'll see we have tons of reporting groups for you to choose from. So let's say that we actually want to look at, just going to choose all of our community continuum projects. For the dates, you're going to put the date range. Now, there's been questions about whether or not I put 1 day plus like I do in other places, or if I put the exact date. If you are on a canned report, just make sure that you put the exact date range. It is not looking for 1 day after. It will include people on July 1st if that's what you've done. So just make sure that you put the exact date ranges that you're looking for. Now the entry exit types is asking what types of projects that you run. In order to capture all of our continuum projects, we have HUD, PATH, and VA projects. For a majority of people running these reports themselves, they're probably selecting HUD projects. But the great thing about the APR is how versatile it is, and you can actually do multiple types of projects and any type of project, all using the same report. But if you have any questions or issues about what this is, usually if you choose the wrong one, it's going to give you 0 numbers, but we can help figure that out for you. So you'll see at the top, now that we've started to run it, it now gives me this option of running it. That means I can navigate away from this screen and I don't have to wait for it to finish in order to see the results. I can actually come back to this whenever it's done, which is helpful than before where you had to stay on the screen. So we can keep refreshing and trying to figure out if it's done. It does take just a minute with the number of programs and the number of the time frame that we're doing. One good thing to think about is you maybe navigate back to the screen. So let me try to do that. As you'll see, if I navigate away, all the information closes. There is this button up here that says use previous parameters. So if you come back to the screen and want to use the same filters that you did before, if you click it, it'll actually fill in your filters for you again. You can then rename your report something else, but you don't have to re-click all the boxes if you just recently ran the report. So our report is now completed. If you click the magnifying glass, it will load your report at the bottom for you. So a couple of things to note as you're looking through this is 4A is letting you know what projects were included, especially if you're in a reporting group. You want to know and make sure that you have all of your projects that you wanted. So it'll list all your projects for you and you can click through and make sure that you have all your projects. Very quickly, what this program, this report tells you is it's going to tell you the total number served. Also, what's really great about running it in a canned file is, as you'll see, a majority of the numbers are blue, which means if I go to click on the blue number, it's actually going to show me who's counted in that number. So I can very quickly do some data quality analysis that I may not otherwise have been able to do with just looking at a number on the screen. So this looks like we served about 1,000 people last year through all of our continuum programs. No, this is a deduplicated number. So if there is somebody who was, especially if you're running the report for numerous projects at a time, if there was someone who hit both of those projects or numerous projects included in the report, that person is only going to be counted once. And any information regarding that person is actually going to come from their last entry or exit. So they're not going to decide any other way of how to pick the data if it's different across projects. They're just going to use their most recent one. So you'll see numbers served. It'll then break it down by population type for you. If you use this, this is a really great way for data quality. Number of persons of an unknown age. So there's 6 people that we didn't actually have a date of birth for. So that's a great way to really check your data quality around some of your missing data. Another one is this one down here, number 15, number of child and unknown age head households. It's probably the same people that we don't know them, but they did list as head of household. So why don't we have their date of birth is what this is asking us. This one is also really interesting. Heads of households and project stayers who were there for longer 365 days. If they were in a project for longer than the 365, which means a year, then you would assume that these people should have had a annual assessment completed. The other thing is if your project isn't supposed to serve people for longer than a year, then you would be questioning why these people are here. So sometimes it can mean that you just did exit them, or there's some other kind of issue, but this is a great way to check to make sure that you have all your boxes checked and your data is accurate. The next couple of boxes is around data quality in particular. You'll see them all labeled with that that name in the front before telling you what it is. There's a couple of categories here, and I can hopefully tell you what the different ones mean. It does throw an error anytime that someone selects client doesn't know or client refused as a choice. So this is telling you that it's not that you didn't ask it or complete the box, but that the answer they gave was client doesn't know or refused. So if you, for some reason, were able to get this number later on, then you would want to go back and make sure that we enter that data. Now, the missing information box means that it's blank, that we're actually missing the information and it actually should be there. So this is a great way. You could click them, copy their client IDs. You could download the results that way too. And you could actually go back and make sure that you're able to click an answer for those people because their data is actually missing. Now, data issues can sometimes be a number of things, but usually it's, especially for these, is incomplete information. Because this is on Social Security number, I can tell you those are probably people who put 4 zeros or only put the last 4 of the social because they didn't have the whole thing, or we only have a partial social. But that's usually what data issues means. Now, this is a great place to look, is the error rate. For a majority of our data pieces, we are hoping that we have less than 3% missing, except for when it comes to Social Security, which we are hoping for, I think it's 5 for all of the other data elements and 10 for Social Security number. Just knowing how sensitive that information is, people are less likely to kind of provide it. So this gives you an idea about how your project's doing in that way. The data quality measures continue down. Again, each of these are clickable, so you're able to click those and see where your data quality issues are. Destination, I think, is one that I would point out to you. This number will always be high because those who disappear or had data not collected as their results are going to be thrown as an error. Usually an income and sources question or error is in regards to just the way that the sources are actually put in. Sometimes you have some conflicting answer because you didn't end a past answer for that income type when you changed the new one. And then sometimes the yes or no box that accompanies each sub-assessment doesn't match what's actually below. So there's a number of reasons why there's some issues with those. Timeliness is actually about how long it's taking people to put information in. Our goal is always in real time, but we do have at least a week for most. So anyone who's down here, isn't necessarily that there's an error with your data, but maybe you should think through your processes if there's a way to make those data entry more timely. As you continue down the report, it's going to start getting into more and more information about the demographics and aggregate numbers of the people that you serve. So you'll see the adults, children, numbers. You also see households. So if you don't need it by just people, but you want to know what types of households you served, those are there. You will then continue down. We get into gender, age, race, ethnicity, their conditions, where you're able to see where they came from. So majority of people are coming from a homeless situation, which is a good thing. And then income, we're able to actually see how many people increase their income during the course of their participation in a program and on average how much. Health insurance, length of participation. This is really interesting, especially 22C. We're actually able to see how many people moved into housing and on average how long it actually took us to move them into housing. Where they actually exited to across our community. And then 25 onwards, you're going to have the same numbers again for veterans, and then it's actually going to go into chronically homeless, and then finally into youth. So it does break it down, those numbers in particular. Now, the only downfall to the APRs, it is going to give you aggregate numbers. So if there is a number on here that is not broken down by chronic, youth or veterans, you are not able to really see how many females were coming from a homeless situation or how many males were coming from a homeless situation. You can't narrow it down in this report in that way. So that is the APR. Again, the keeper is going to show you very similar things, and you're actually going to use a very similar template to get the report. Service transactions is where you're going to figure out which provider you want to look for. Are you looking for just the services provided by your provider? And then what's your actual date range of the need and the service. Every time you actually make a service transaction, it has an accompanying need, but you only have to actually put the service transaction date period that you're looking for in order for it to build your report. But again, all of these are accessible in this drop down to every user that is in our system. All right, so back to our presentation, and we're going to go into art reporting. Art reporting, again, is only accessible to the users who have been given a license. Everyone on the call today should have an art reporting license, so you do have access to everything that we are seeing. So if you have questions about who in your agency does, or whether you have one yourself, you can usually see the link for the art reports on Service Point. That's a great way to check for yourself. And then if you need to know who in your agency, I can give you that list. One thing to take into account with art reports is warehouse builds occur every day. So they actually pull data into art from Service Point. Those typically occur every morning, usually early morning. I think the time frame is like 3 to 4 o'clock. But the data in art is only as up to date as the last warehouse build. So what that means is if I'm trying to run data out of an art report and I just changed someone's data, I actually have to wait to the next day to see that change reflect in the report that I am running. So just take that into account if you're trying to run an art report and get the data from there. If you've already made changes, they will not show in the report that you're about to run in the next few minutes. All other reporting options provide some real-time results, but again, art does not. But we are able to really use art to produce some complex reports. So just a few things to mention when we're using art. If you want to know all the options of the art reports, and there are a lot, in the public folder and under the art gallery reports, there's something called an art gallery index. That index will actually show you all the options and give you a brief explanation of what is in the report and what that report is used for. So it's a great way to really figure out which one you want to be running. Also, all the other reports that you use are in one of the folders in there called public folder. Should be the only folder that you really need to have access to, but there are a number of folders within that. So under there, the two most that you're going to be looking at is the admin well sky folder. These are the reports that are kept up by our vendors, so we know them to be maintained and accurate. And then the reports custom current folder, and those are the reports that the HMIS team has created for community purposes. And we'll go through some reports that are helpful in each of those. My recommendation would be that if you're looking to use a report that is not in one of these folders, I would question the validity of the report and try to figure out if there's some other way to get your data. I cannot promise that any reports that are in the other admin folders are actually up to date and not broken or giving you accurate information. So just be really careful about what folder you're pulling the reports from. The most used reports that you're probably going to use as an individual agency The first one is a data completeness report that is in the admin folder. We use this report in order to do some of that data quality analysis. It will tell you whether or not the information that you've entered has all of the information entered. Now, it does have a downfall because it will not tell you whether or not the information is accurate, but it will tell you whether or not the information is there. You will have to use some of the other reports, like the data quality reports that we were looking at within the APR, to help you figure out some of those incongruencies and some of the other accuracy issues. But this data completeness report will at least tell you, is the box filled? We also use a lot the exit destination outcomes report that is also in the admin folder. This is a great way to check the end goal of your project. Are we moving people into housing? And so this will give you a really good sense of what that is looking like. And then finally, in the custom folder, there is a DHCD Emergency Shelter Learning Clinic monthly matrix report. This gives you information about the number of people that have come in and out of your shelter, where they went, how long they were there, to really make sure that we're moving people as quickly as possible and that we're moving them to permanent housing. Now, there will also be, seeing I'm missing that now, there will also be the VHSP report that you use in order to submit in CAMS for any grant funding, and that can be found in the public folder as well. So let me switch over to the site so you can see where some of these things are and how you actually fill out some of the prompts for the information. Okay, so as you can see, here is this art gallery report, and if you click on the art gallery index and click download, you will actually be given a listing of each of the reports. So if you want to know what the duplicate clients report in art will do, it's designed to assist administrators in finding duplicate clients for more than one selected provider. So it gives you some really good information about what each art report is able to do. I use this in trying to figure out which one I want to, depending on what information I'm trying to find out. So this is a great place to start. Now, when we're in art again, you have the custom current folder and the WellSky folder. Again, archive, Margot, and unsupported. I can't confirm that those reports are accurate, so please try not to use them. But if we're in the WellSky report, if you're not doing the data completeness report card, I really think you should try it. At one point, the COC was providing this to providers each month, and it just got too difficult. So I usually do this on a more quarterly basis or even less frequently, depending on capacity. But this is a great way that you can actually run each month what your projects look like. Please know that art takes forever at times. The rainbow circle seems to be going forever, but just know it's working on it. This box down here will actually give you the ability to search. If you hit the binoculars after you type in your search material, then you can actually search. Double click to move it over. Your start date is whatever you want the start of the reporting period to be. Now, in art, you do use a +1. This is going to ensure that your report is going to be run for July 1st to June 30th, but they use the +1 to tell the system to do that. Now, on the report card, they want to know whether or not you're required to have services. So if you click no, then they're not going to check whether or not you have services because it's not a required piece. PATH and SOAR projects are required, and so you want to make sure that each of those projects actually have that data in there. So you would click the yes for those. But we're going to, for now, say no, and then you're going to run entry. Again, it's going to go all the way to the end. It's usually not done, but very fast this time, I see. Okay, so the first tab is going to give you information. And for some reason, it's telling me we haven't started. Oh, because we didn't. So here we go. The blue line went all the way to the end. The rainbow circle keeps going. So this is not an accurate representation of the time you have left. So just be aware and be patient as we try to get the information to come up.
Our job is to just facilitate the process. And I'm not in it. The next thing, staff.
There it goes. So again, takes a minute, but once it finally comes up, the first thing that you're going to see is a summary. It's going to give you an overall grade of how your report card looks based on your missing data. Then it's going to break it down by each line item so you can see. Again, you want to try to be within that 5 to 10% for some of these categories. We have the leniency on Social Security number for 10% and some of the other things. So this project in particular has some missing income sources for one of their people. Here's how many people are in the project being counted. Here's how many have them all filled. And that's why they're below that threshold that we talked about for this program. Now, if you go to the provider report card, you'll see some of the same information, but tab D actually gives you a line-by-line count of each client in the system and who has the missing data. And here's the missing data. So this person has 14 of the 15 options filled out, and so therefore they're missing some of their data. So you can actually go back, use the client ID to find them in the system, correct your data. If you have a number of projects, you can actually, when you go to create your prompts to run this report. So let's say we're going to run it for all MICA projects at a time. You pull over how many projects you want included. So you can actually do it for all your projects. You don't have to keep running it over and over and over again. You can keep doing it, and then it'll show you the overall, but then it'll break it down per project as well. So Mike, I think that actually answers your question that you put in the chat about running data quality reports by project and for all COC aggregated. So you can add as many projects as you want as you pull these out. So you would do the same thing for each of the reports that you would run. Select your project, select your time frame, and then any other. I think the key things to note are start date will always be the start that you want the report to run. End date will always be one day after you want the report to end. And then if they ever ask you for an effective date, it's always the same day as your end date. But there's lots of ways to kind of get some information out of here and run them. And it's nice that it shows up in a really nice report for you on like Report Writer, which we're going to talk about in just a second. So let's go back to the presentation. Report Writer. Report Writer is going to actually allow you to access raw data from the system to do your own external analysis. Now, where art gives you these really complex reports, and they're all summarized very nicely in a chart when it's done, you're actually going to have to pull, basically data dump the information out of Report Writer, use Excel to do your manipulation. And so it's structured in a way where you're able to go through a step-by-step report creation using the tables, fields, filters that you're offered. So as we kind of go through, and I'll show you how to build a report and also some reports that are already in the system that you can use. Tables are going to actually be the entry-exit tables and the assessments that you're telling the system to search for the fields that you're wanting. Now on the Fields tab, we're actually going to go through which data we want included in our report. It doesn't have to include everything that's asked in those tables, but what specific fields do you want included in your Excel form? And then finally, the filters are going to set the parameters that we limit the results. So if we only want clients who entered between a certain date, or we only want clients who identified as a veteran, or we only want people who had a VI SPDAT completed. That's how we run prioritization. Like those filters help us really narrow down so that we don't get everyone in the system who have that question completed or not completed, but just the specific people for the data that we want to run. The counting is going to actually just provide you an aggregate count of what's going to be shown in the preview, and then the preview is going to be your actual report results with an option to actually download it to get that Excel file where you can actually manipulate those numbers. Options you are able to save in your report, in Report Writer that you create. You're able to name the report. You're actually able to change the columns. So in what order do you want the data elements to be shown? And then if you don't like the way that HMIS names those columns, because they use the whole very long question for something, you can actually change it. I think a really good example is how many times in the last 3 years have you been homeless? I don't need a column that says how many times in the last 3 years have you been homeless. I want a column that says maybe number of times homeless. So I can actually change the column to actually just say number of times homeless. So you can actually make it a little bit easier to actually navigate to the data very easily for what you're looking for. Now, there's lots of different tables to choose from. The key here is to know what table houses the information that you're looking for. Now, tables, which I'll show you in the system in just a second, is broken up into 3 different types. There's tables, which client and entry exits, which are marked on here, are usually the only 2 that we click. There are then assessments, and that's what we use for all of the entry exit questions or update questions or exit questions that come up when you actually go to enroll someone in a project. The most commonly used ones are here. They're going to be the entry assessment for street outreach, emergency shelter, and safe haven if you fit into one of those projects. Any other project that's not a street outreach, emergency shelter, or safe haven will actually have their information housed in the all other project assessment. Then we have an exit assessment and update assessment. So these are the 4 that we use the most. If you are running it for a PATH program, there's a separate assessment for PATH. If you're running it for a VA program, then there's a separate assessment for VA. So it's just figuring out where the questions and the data that you want included in your analysis are housed. If you ever have a question about which report or which assessment houses what, please let me know, and I'm happy to help figure out where that is. Now, just some tips about Report Writer before we actually go through how we make a report. Always include the client and household ID. It's going to make your life easier as you go to filter, count, and do pivot tables and other things within Excel. Household ID actually helps you understand how many people are together, where you may not be able to capture that information from the other columns. Do not include both and or operators in the same filter. You're going to want to use two different filter groups, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Avoid deleting reports in Report Writer. Continue to save new ones with, you can use the same name, just put a different date on the end so you know which one's the most up to date. I'm going to show you there's a ton of reports already in Report Writer. If you need to find one of those reports, they are actually in alphabetical order. And then always spot check your reports. If it looks or feels wrong, it's probably wrong. So if you actually send me a screenshot of your filters, which is usually probably the #1 issue of why people aren't showing up that you think should, I'm happy to help troubleshoot what that looks like for you. And then finally, it takes trial and error. So if at first you don't succeed, just try again. Keep playing with it until you get what you need. I think one of the biggest tips I want to let you know about Report Writer, which is why I love art, is Report Writer is limited because it does not always tie the data to the project, but to the person. And so, especially depending on what you're pulling out, it may not tie the response that you're seeing to the project that you're seeing, but to the last response that was included. And that might not make sense, but I think a great example is we might not care as much for race, because race isn't going to change usually. So you will never notice a difference probably with someone's race not being captured. But let's say their previous destination. Maybe when they entered a MICA project, their previous destination was on the street. Then they moved to Lois Ann's Hope House for shelter, and now their previous destination was in a MICA hotel. And so when you go later on to pull the MICA data, it may not show the on-the-street designation, even though that was what was answered in that project. It's now going to be overwritten by the emergency shelter, including a hotel voucher paid for by a charitable organization instead, because that's their most recent response. So just be aware of some of those things when you're trying to get that level of information or do anything with exit destinations or previous living situations or anything like that. I would recommend trying to use either a canned report or an art report for those things, just given the limitations that come with Report Writer. All right, so let me switch over one last time to the system so we can look at Report Writer. Now, remember when we are using our system, we share our system with 3 other COCs and the balance of state. And so there are a ton of reports in here. I try really hard to name them FRCOC. So if you ever click the F, because they are in alphabetical order, you'll see all the ones that I have made. I'm also happy to make reports for you. If there's something that you're looking for and you're just struggling to make it, let me make the report for you and then we can go through. Anne-Marie also knows how to make them and I think would be happy to help try to troubleshoot some of those things, but let us help you. We've also put in a number of templates. So if you actually go towards the end, you will see the templates. Here we go. FRCOC template for call records, for date range, for open records. These are a great starting point most of the time, so you don't have to completely do all of the building yourself. But I'm going to show you how to build one from scratch so you know what it looks like. So you can click the new report button. I'm then going to click clients and entry exit, and then here's the assessment. So the assessment I'm going to choose for this one is the entry. So here is our entry. You'll notice there's a bunch of different ones, but we are always the COC one, FRCOC one. We're going to choose this one. Okay, so I've chosen my tables that I wanted to pull. Now, within those tables, which fields do I want included? Again, always include the client ID, and the household ID is usually in a different spot. The field, the fields are also in alphabetical order. So just make sure that you're looking for all of those. For entry exits, that's where you're actually going to get your entry date and your exit date. If you want the reason why they left and the destination, those are really great things. I'm just going to do a few here so you can see what it would end up looking like. So maybe I want to look at, let's say I'm going to do a report on what was the race of people and how long they stayed and where they left to. So I'm going to do race and all of the information regarding their exit. Now for the filters, here's where you're actually going to add. These are always going to be defaulted. Leave them on there. You want to only include active people in the system. Now you can click add filter group and add as many as you want. So if I am going to look for only the people who entered during the reporting period of last fiscal year, then I'm going to look for people who have an entry date on or before the last date of the year. And then I'm also going to do those who have an exit date on or after the first day of the year. So it feels backwards, but it's setting those parameters. And then for this, I also want to include anyone who is not yet exited. So if I put those who do not have an exit date, they will include those. It's an or question. You can't have someone who exited and did not exit, so it's an or question. So that's where this is from. If I then want to actually do it by a provider, again, this is asking you where to pull the filter from. So if you know where that is, if I only want it for, let's say, the Mica hotels, then you can do it that way. So once you have all your filters in here, and again, this is usually where people end up tripping and why it's not pulling the data that they want. Then you can actually hit the preview and you'll see what your results are. It takes just a second to actually process it, and then it'll actually give you the client ID, where they discharged to, how long they were there, why they left, primary race. But let's say I don't want them in this order. I want these information towards the end. So if I go to the options, you can name it whatever you would like to name it. If I want to sort it, let's say I want primary race up at the top. So we can resort the order, which they are. If I want to rename this to something simple like why left, I can actually rename it. And so now when I actually go back to my preview, it'll show me what my new options are in the new order, the new names. There is always this download. It will let you know, just know that the size of your results may take a while to actually download. It may not be immediate. Just confirm that you understand, and then you let it down. It will always come out as a zip file, which then you can open into an Excel file and do your manipulation. So one thing that I use a lot, just as a tip for you, I usually create a pivot table to do some basic counting. So if you go to insert pivot table, it's asking you where to pull the data from. And then you're able to choose exit destinations. Don't want the sum, I actually want the count. So this is a really quick way. Now I've taken all the raw data out of the system. I've now done a very quick pivot table to see how many people of the data that I had actually had a particular destination that they went to. So from this, I can see that a majority of people actually went to rapid rehousing from the hotels. Or the next one down is they went to permanent housing other than rapid rehousing, which means PSH to me. So this is a really great way of saying, okay, we're doing pretty well with exits to housing from the hotels, moving to housing. Now, if I wanted to add race in there as a filter, then I can. So it'd be interesting to see, well, how are we doing with people of color as they exit? So again, a majority of people who are exiting to permanent housing and to rapid. So there's those. So we can use those to really see the filters and the snapshot of what you're looking for. But again, anything that you take out of Report Writer, you're gonna have to manipulate yourself. So that's the only thing to think about. But yes, I think Report Writer is great to really be able to build anything that you want in the configurations that you want, but just know the limitations that come behind some of those things. So I think at this point, that is all that I have for material, unless someone has questions.
I have a question that might be overly specific for the purpose of the recording about the service transaction.